Hello and welcome to my story about how the road to Agile Coaching made me a gambling addict, a very sobering and cautionary tale. My name is Ravi Verma. I'm an entrepreneur, Agile coach, and trainer, the founder and org whisperer at smoothapps.com. I have about 16 years in the software delivery and consulting industry, worked in companies like AT&T, Cisco, Avaya, Hewlett-Packard, and Siemens, to name just a few. And I started out with a bachelor's in computer science and engineering as a developer and got my master's in entrepreneurship along the way. And I became fascinated with agile software delivery and became a certified or professional Scrum trainer. And I've always been fascinated about how businesses can apply agile software delivery to optimize value. So I became an evidence based management consultant as well. Now, the question is, how did all of this lead towards a gambling addiction? So, this is not easy for me. As you can imagine, this is a big risk, but I feel that I have a responsibility to myself and to the industry in case other people are about to embark on the journey that got me here, or some may already be on this journey and may not realize it. And also, it helps me uh, with the healing process and manage my situation. So, let's start at the beginning. About a year ago, I went to Boston for a professional Scrum product owner train the trainer course presented by Ken Schwaber, the co-creator of Scrum, and Gunther Varian, who is the steward of the professional Scrum training series by Scrum.org. And they began the class with a question to all of us. Imagine we had a briefcase full of cash and we went to a casino, maybe we went to Las Vegas, with the goal of earning enough money that we could retire for life. Let's imagine that this briefcase had $50,000 of cash, and we had two options. We could place one bet of $50,000, or we could place 50 bets of $1,000. Which option would we choose and why? As you can imagine, almost everyone in the class chose the option of placing 50 smaller bets. And the reason was that in an environment of risk and uncertainty, as is provided by a gambling game or in a casino, smaller bets are better because then we can look at the results of our bets and we can adapt our approach. We can adjust the strategy for an existing game. Maybe we can pick a different game and then we can alter the future bets in such a way that we are closer and closer to our investment objective. But what does all of this have to do with software delivery? Now, it turns out that the world of complex software delivery is not very different from gambling or a casino because things rarely turn out the way we expect them to, just as it so happens that things rarely turn out the way we expect them to in a casino. Look back at your career in the software industry and ask yourself how often in your experience are business and IT on the same page with respect to what we should build? How often are IT teams on the same page with respect to how we should build things, the solution? How often do third-party components behave exactly as we thought they would? How often does the solution behave as expected in the production based on its behavior in the lab environment? And how often do customers behave exactly the way you thought they would as you were writing the requirements? Most of the time, the market does not remain static between the time that you wrote the requirements and you deployed the solution. And sometimes it can change in a way that you really did not anticipate. So, certainty and guarantees in the world of software delivery, there are none. And anyone who says otherwise is either misinformed or they may be talking about something that is not complex software delivery. We choose the word complex very carefully. If you look at the modified Stacy matrix on the right, you can see that problems can be classified into different categories based on the degree of ambiguity about requirements, the degree of certainty of the underlying technology, and the degree of predictability in human behavior of people working on the teams. Now, when we are in a domain of problems where there is more disagreement or ambiguity about requirements than there is agreement, when there is more uncertainty in the behavior of technology than there is certainty, and when the human behavior of team members is more unpredictable than predictable, that domain of problems is called complex problems. And if you're in the domain of software delivery, that domain of problems is called complex software delivery. This is the sweet spot of Agile. This is where Agile software delivery frameworks like Scrum can help us manage this uncertainty and this ambiguity and the risk. So when you have such few guarantees, such little certainty, a lot is at risk. Our investment in our IT teams is at risk. Our ability to deliver solutions to the market on a given date is at risk. Possibly our revenue projections and forecasts are at risk. We could lose some market share, and there might be other risks that are specific to your industry or your company. So when there's so much at risk, so much at stake, how can we manage this risk so we do not lose more than we can afford to lose? The first step in this inquiry is to recognize that what gets measured gets managed. This is a famous quote by Peter Drucker. So how can we measure the size of the bets that we are placing in our complex software delivery? Let's look at a simple model. So let's imagine there is an organization where the average hourly blended rate per team member is $85 an hour. Maybe there are about 10 members per team. This deviates from the guideline of having 7 plus minus 2 or 6 plus or minus 3 people per team. But we are doing this just to keep the math simple, and it will become evident in a few slides. Maybe each Scrum team is picking work or backlog items and converting it into shippable increments, and it so turns out that a given project impacts 5 Scrum teams. And a program comprises on average of about 5 funded projects, and an investment portfolio has about 2 programs. So people work about 8 hours a day, 5 business days a week, and they have chosen 4 weeks as the duration of their sprint. So one quarter has got 3 sprints, half a year 6 sprints, 9 for 3 quarters, and 12 in a year on average. So this is the landscape that we are talking about. So let's visualize this organization. Here you can see a team of developers. These are the people who take backlog items and convert them to potentially shippable increments. The product owner who optimizes the value of IT investment, and the Scrum Master who ensures that the rules of Scrum are followed, facilitates self-organization within the team, helps remove obstacles, and overall helps enable delivery of value. And as we saw before, a project is about impacts 5 Scrum teams, program has about 5 projects, and a portfolio has got about 2 programs. So in this kind of a landscape, how can we measure the buildup of the bets or the uncertainty or the risk exposure in this kind of an organization? So let's look at the bets that are building up over time for a single developer. So for 1 hour, it's just $85, not a big bet. A day, 85 multiplied by 8, $680, and so on. At maybe about less than 6 sprints, the wager is $50,000, 3 quarters, less than 3 quarters, 9 sprints, $100,000, and you hit the 150K mark in less than 12 sprints. So what this means is that the amount of work that a developer does, if it turns out that there were some invalid assumptions and the work has to be scrapped or thrown away from a purely monetary perspective, that is the amount that we are putting at risk. If you start talking about a scrum team, now the bets are starting to get larger, because every hour, to keep the math simple, we said there are 10 team members and we have about $850 at stake. In a day, it's almost $7,000. In a week, $34,000. And in 2 quarters, you reach the $500,000 mark, less than 2 quarters. You reach $1 million in less than 9 sprints, and $1.5 million in 1 year. When you scale it up to 5 scrum teams, you can see that the bets start adding up very fast. And one sprint can cost the company $500,000. And 1 quarter, 3 sprints could be $2 million, and so on, with the annual risk exposure of $8 million. So if you have a funded project that lasts for $8 million and you're doing your integration and deploying to production at the end of 1 year, it's possible that somewhere here in the first few weeks that you may have made an invalid assumption, whether it comes to requirements or architecture or design, that only comes to light here. And depends on your unique situation how much of the work has to be thrown away or redone, but potentially in a worst case scenario, perhaps all $8 million could be throwaway work. And not to mention the loss in time to market, because if you have to go back and redo everything, you may have just lost 1 year's worth of time to market. Situation gets even more alarming if you scale up and if you go from one project to a program of interrelated projects which must be delivered together for a business solution. So here, as you can see, if you have about 25 scrum teams, every hour is a $21,000 bet. Every day is a $170,000 bet. A week is $850,000, and within one sprint, you can hit the $3 million mark, $40 million annually. And finally, if you have a large investment portfolio, maybe 2 programs, about 50 scrum teams, you can see how these bets are adding up. $42,000 an hour, $340,000 a day, more than $250,000, $1.7 million in a week, and so on. So these are some pretty eye-popping numbers. And when we combine the size of these bets, the wagers, with the uncertainty in complex software delivery, and the stakes and the risk exposure, it leads us to an interesting question. How big a bet are our investors comfortable with us placing on our complex software delivery projects? How much investment are they willing to lose? How many weeks of delay are they willing to accommodate in time to market? And how much revenue loss or loss of market share are they willing to absorb? Usually, most businesses will answer that question with a figure which is 4 weeks or less of loss of IT investment, time to market. So this is a question that I would encourage you to ask your investors, your executives, and your stakeholders. And how you apply the answer is that you structure your scrum teams and your sprints so that your sprint size is less than or equal to the risk tolerance of your investors. So usually it means your sprint size, according to Scrum, will be 4 weeks or less. Find a way to integrate and deploy your solutions to production every sprint, even if in certain cases certain features are being deployed dark. Because that journey of taking a requirement and then coding it and testing it and then deploying it to production, that is the only journey that uncovers certain invalid assumptions The moment you uncover them, you learn, you become better, and you stop building an expensive house on a foundation that is going to crack and collapse when the whole house is, completed. So now let's assume that we applied these ideas, we found out the investor's risk tolerance, we had our sprints organized such that the sprint duration was less than or equal to the risk tolerance of our investors, and we started creating some transparency or visibility on the size of the bets that we are placing on behalf of our investors. How can we manage these bets so that we can generate the return of investment that our investors are looking for and create value for our business? The answer is that we must elevate empiricism to the level of the entire business and the entire organization. And here's one possible way of doing this. It's a technique called evidence-based management that has been created based on the management techniques used in medicine by Scrum.org. So an interesting white paper that explains this evidence-based management approach that has been created by Scrum.org, the white paper has been written by Gunther. And what Gunther says is that the complexity and the creative nature of software development makes it extremely fascinating, which is why many of us enjoy being in this game. But at the same time, this game is quite unpredictable, like, the outcome in a casino. And Scrum has been used for many years to apply empiricism and systematic inspection and adaptation to deal with this unpredictability. And we can take that approach and now elevate it and apply not only to the software delivery Scrum team, but to an entire business organization. And that is the main idea or principle of evidence-based management. So managers are starting to realize this, and they're starting to shift towards evidence for decision making. Information and insights that are gained from actually deploying the solution to production are more valuable than any amount of upfront analysis and conversations and whiteboarding. Because when you don't have observable work in production, anything else is just a hypothesis. It is not a fact, it is not knowledge or evidence. So if you want to make informed decisions, what exactly do we need? Well, we need knowledge. And where does knowledge come from? Knowledge comes from comparing an actual result by deploying something to production and seeing the metrics and the response of the market and comparing it to our hypothesis of what we thought would happen when we deployed to production. And it doesn't matter whether your hypothesis was correct or incorrect, but what will happen when you compare the actual versus the forecast is that you will get new wisdom, actionable insight, and then you can capitalize on that insight and adjust your future behavior. And if you do this better than your competition, you have the engine or the foundation of a sustainably competitive organization. So how do we do this in a methodical way such that it is not a flash in the pan? So a highly dynamic and safe way to gather the evidence is you state a hypothesis, you work on a hypothesis for a limited time, maybe a sprint or less, you verify the results of the work, and then you continuously learn, but it's not theoretical learning, because while you're learning, you're actually deploying your solution to the market and you're making progress on implementing your business model, your idea. So evidence-based management takes key performance indicators in an organization and it groups them in different buckets. So one bucket is, does this organization have the ability to innovate? Does this organization have the ability to sustain the delivery of innovative ideas and sustainably deliver value? And does this organization have the ability to take some ideas and deploy them to market effectively? And evidence-based management combines these indicators into an index, a weighted index called the agility index. And this is the foundation for a closed loop, a feedback loop, where we begin by inspecting the organizational agility. We correlate that outcome to certain underlying activities or practices. And then we do some diagnosis to say which practices are serving us well and which might need some adaptation. And based on that, we make some adjustments and adaptations. We improve our processes and practices. And then we inspect the organizational value again, and we inspect the organizational agility. So based on these short cycles, which are typically about 90 days in duration, we create a closed loop where the organization is continuously inspecting and adapting the business value and becoming a modern, competitive organization, a sustainably competitive organization. Some of the big visible information radiators that evidence-based management relies upon are, one of the biggest one is a radar graph, which shows us visually how the 11 performance indicators are either progressing or regressing over time as a result of some of the choices that we have made. And providing this degree of transparency helps us hypothesize which action caused a desired result, which may have had an unintended consequence, and how might we alter our behavior and choices in the future. And it's also important for executives to invest precious time and money in agility in the context, in the overall context of the return of investment that it is producing with respect to these 11 performance indicators, or you could complement them with indicators that are relevant to your unique company or industry. So if we reflect, it turns out that complex software delivery is like high stakes gambling. There is a lot of uncertainty and there is a lot at risk. And even the smartest person or team cannot consistently predict or guarantee what's going to happen. Nobody can guarantee consistently that the solution will work exactly as we designed it, that the market will react exactly as we thought it would, or that the business will generate or harvest exactly as much value as we thought it would. So every morning, our investors give us a briefcase full of cash. And this amount of money in this cash may vary for a Scrum team with an average hourly blended rate of a developer at $85 an hour. It may be about $7,000. And this briefcase for a portfolio could have about $340,000 every day. Our investors expect us to be effective at gambling with their time and money. They expect us to understand their risk tolerance. They expect us to have transparency about the size of the bets we are placing on their behalf. And they expect us to manage the bets so that we optimize the return of investment and value within the tolerance of the failure, the risk tolerance of the business. Our investors expect us to be expert empirical gamblers. And empirical gambling requires the three pillars: transparency into the size and placement of the bets, frequent inspection of the results of the bets, and frequent adaptation of the size and placement of future bets. And one way of doing this in a rigorous, in a methodical, and a safe manner is evidence-based management. So we can start by creating the hypothesis. We can place small calculated bets, deploy to production, inspect the response, measure the ROI and value, and learn, and then adapt our future bets. So yes, those of us who are in the business of complex software delivery are high stakes gamblers, and we love what we do. And so I have no shame in acknowledging and accepting that yes, I love and I'm addicted to high stakes gambling, and I think I'm pretty good at it. But we must remember that this is what we do: come out of denial, acknowledge the reality, and get better at this game. So here's my call to action. Find out what is your investor's risk tolerance. Come up with a way to track your bets and create transparency across your organization. Find some techniques to manage the bets within the risk tolerance of your investors and to generate the investment outcome of your investors, and find a way to continuously learn and adapt. So, if this was thought provoking and you would like to continue the conversation, I would love to talk. And in either way, thank you for listening to my story. I hope that this helps us all start a conversation that helps us improve the profession of software development. Thank you. Keep calm and scrum on.